what are the top three sort of policy features that you think make a program really work, especially for the rural communities? Like what if you could pick out three, what would be the ones you say that, school choice policy should have at least these three things in them?
So I think number one is going to be statewide, right? So not obviously geographically saying these major urban centers are eligible, So I think that's one. I think two is going to be the certifications for the schools and what does that look like, right? So allowing flexibility for various schools to participate in the programming. So like credentials. So for Tennessee, there's a large portion of non-public schools that are not going to be eligible this coming year, and many of them are in rural districts. And it doesn't mean they're not a good school. It just means maybe for their size right now, they've been able to accomplish these type of credentials or not. So I think so broadening the credentials that are accepted by school choice is a big piece of it. And then I think the third thing that I would say would be is ensuring that, and this is probably a little counterintuitive, but it's like, we are required in Tennessee to give a nationally normed assessment. And so families in rural districts, they know education, right? They are not, because you live in a rural area, doesn't mean you're less educated, doesn't mean that you're less, likely to want success for your kid. And so I actually think by providing an assessment requirement, it gives us the ability in a rural district to say, hey, here's how our students are performing, right? They are performing just as high as a student in an urban area. And they've actually been able to grow academically. And we have data to prove that in this nationally normed assessment. And so I think that that's important to be able to say, hey, we're going to have a high quality, experience for students and for families, and not just on how they feel, but literally academically because they perform this way. And so I think that those three things allow us to have a sustainable program long term, but also to be able to expand it in the future to other schools, other credentialing agencies beyond the ones that are maybe in there now.
Fascinating. Yeah. You've touched on a lot of the key arguments here, but I kind of want to dive into them because of your great perspective. Yeah. So looking for on one side and then the other, let's try investigate, especially with your background sort of in the public school arena, when you were an administrator there, putting that hat on for a minute. What are the strongest arguments you think are there for how these private school choice programs could hurt rural communities?
Yeah. So I think when you boil down to, I think it's just a couple things. One is going to be who is going to take advantage of choice, right? So regardless of how the economic structures are, regardless of the opportunities in the area for high quality non-public schools, there are going to be a group of families and students that do not have the resources available, whether to complete the application. Right. The wherewithal to do that. Students. So I do think it's going to take a certain, amount of students away from a public school that maybe are the more engaged families to be able to do these things. And I do think that that's going to be an impact there. I think that, and so is that positive or is that negative? And so the perspective is, are we trying to preserve an institution? Or are we trying to let families do what's best for their child? The second thing I think is going to be is funding. So yes, hold harmless, their overall budget, but over time, with the cost of living increases, with inflation coming along, is there enough funds available to ensure that we're providing a high quality education for all public school students? And so for students that do school choice, and what we have seen is that and we don't know the answer to that long term in Tennessee, right? Because we're just now expanding it to where it's going to be an impactful, opportunity for families. And so I think at the end of the day, are you even funding public schools to the level in which they should be funded before you begin another initiative? Like that would be that is to me the only argument really, as if I'm not supporting school choice, that really holds water. Because we spend public dollars on private services and literally everything else, right? From healthcare to food programs to roadways. I mean, like everything, right? Is not just government. And so I think that's the argument. Do we even fund it enough from the very beginning?
That makes sense. I know on the other side, so you've already touched on a lot of these, but what's your by far your strongest standout argument for why private school choice is important and those should be supported? So what's the support side, nail in the coffin argument.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's is that what is the most fundamental belief, that makes America what it is? And I think that's the family, right? I think the freedom of the family to go, where they want to go, to do what they want to do, and to not be hindered just because of where they've grown up or where they were born. Right. And so as a first generation college graduate, it's so important. I would not have been able to go to college without Pell Grant opportunities, right? Like that helped me achieve things that have never been achieved before my family. And I think school choice in pre-K 12 makes the exact same point. Right, is who knows students best, families, and what limits do we want to put on students? Where you were born, the zip code that you're in, should that dictate the kind of school that you get to go to? Or should it be that whatever opportunity your family thinks best, that's what you should be able to do? Right. And so to me, that is the biggest argument, as parents know best, opportunity shouldn't be dictated just because of the zip code that you live in. Competition makes things better. Right, like we may not like it, we may not want it, but if there's only one restaurant in town and it's free, it's probably going to go well, right? Like people are probably going to go to that restaurant, regardless of the product, because there's the only one and it doesn't cost anything. But if there's a place across the street that you can take your free meal voucher to, right, as if we're using that same analogy, now what are these two restaurants going to be? They're going to be competing for your business, right? And so I have, as a public school administrator and as a non-public school administrator, I view families and students as our customers, right? So yes, I'm going to stay who I am, and there's values we won't bend, but I want to do what's best for the kid, but I also want to be a good steward of the resources I have and try to make it a great experience for them. And so I think that helps in that regard as well. There's not another place like that, right?
Yeah.
Where there's no competition.